My name is Alice Appleton. I'm a program manager with Microsoft 365, focusing on role-based access control for administrators. So just to level set the room, make sure we're all on the same page about what we mean when we say RBAC. We're talking about admin permissions. It's the main conceptual model that we use where we assign someone a role to give them access. So we've been spending a lot of time with you listening to your feedback about how role-based access control is working in Microsoft 365. And we've heard 3 core issues from you. Now I have to ask, do we have any global admins in the house today? Yes. Maybe too many. We'll get into that more in a second. But it's great to see representation here. Is anyone here not a global admin, but they need to go to a global admin to get help because they don't have permissions to do all of their tasks? Right, so my sympathies to all of you, and we'll get into that more in just a second. And then do we have any folks, maybe some of the global admins, who are responsible for managing admin permissions in their organization? All right, we're in the right session. Whew, that's great to hear. So, oops, getting ahead of myself. So what are these 3 core issues? Too many tasks require the global admin role. It's hard for you to understand who all of your administrators are and what access level they actually have in the organization. And we're beating you over the head with the recommendation of have fewer than 5 global admins, but it's hard for you to actually go ahead and move to least privilege with the tools and information that we're giving you. So what I'm going to do today is go issue by issue with those 3 issues and talk about dig into the challenges a little bit, both from a security perspective and an operations perspective, present some new features in response to these challenges. I don't want to overpromise. We haven't solved everything yet. There's a lot of work we still need to do, but I'm excited about some of the new things I'm going to show you today, and I hope that they will make your life easier as well as safer. And then want to make sure everyone's aware of some key best practices for RBAC. So let's jump in. Too many tasks require the global admin role. So what are the implications of this? There's typically 2 paths that we see customers take because of this. The first is you assign global admin to a lot of people in your organization. Do we have anyone who's going to admit publicly to doing that? It's OK. Circle of trust, yeah. More than you do that, then raise your hands, OK. So there's a security problem with that, which is global admin accounts are attacked and compromised at nearly twice the rate of other admin accounts. And it's pretty straightforward as to why, right? Global admins have the keys to the kingdom, so attackers are targeting them specifically. That's the main reason we want you all to reduce your dependence on the global admin role, and we need to help you do that. The second issue with this is operational. Accidents happen. People think a setting means something else, and they switch it on or off, and they think it's not a big deal. And all of a sudden, you're a couple weeks down the line fixing that issue. And we don't want that to happen. The second customer behavior we see is that folks lock down access. And from a security perspective, that has its own challenges because we know that if users are too locked down, they will find workarounds, whether it's sharing credentials or sending sensitive information over email. And then, of course, there's the operational challenge with this, which is that global admins become the bottleneck in the organization, and you all feel randomized in terms of what you have to do on a day-to-day basis. So what are we doing to help this? In the past 6 months, we've shipped Global Reader and 12 other new limited admin roles in Azure Active Directory, so fewer of your tasks require the global admin role. I wanted to highlight 3 of these before we get into global admin specifically. Groups admin, we know it was a big pain point because groups cross multiple services, Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, et cetera. It was too much privilege for you to assign those service level roles to someone if all they're doing is managing the lifecycle of groups. So we created a role specifically for that. Authentication admin for managing MFA properties for your users. We know it's been a big pain point. You get a lot of support calls around things like MFA. You shouldn't have to use global admin to reset an MFA property. And password admin. This role is supported by admin units. So for example, if you are an educational institute, if you're a K-12 school, you can now assign password admin to your teachers, and they'll only be able to reset passwords for the students that are in their classrooms. But I have to admit, my favorite out of all of these roles is the global reader role. Thank you. I will take the golf clap. Thank you. So global reader is the read-only counterpart to global admin. Customers have told us that it's useful for planning, for audits. It's actually quite useful for security investigations because security reader doesn't grant access to things like service settings. And it's also useful for feature discovery. We heard from you all last year at Ignite. This was the #1 ask we heard from administrators at Ignite last year, and so we are really excited that we were able to work across the company to ship this to you this year. What we found is that customers who have already adopted the global reader role, about 24% of those customers have, since adopting it, reduced their number of global admins. So we do have some early evidence that it is getting you off of global admin, and we're working to have that number go up over time. And we've also heard from customers who are in our private preview that global reader is useful not just independently assigning the role by itself, but also in combination with limited admin roles like user admin or exchange admin. We had one specific customer, as an example, who took a chunk of their global admins, moved them to global reader, and then incrementally added back specific roles based on the actual management actions that those admins needed to take. So we thought that was super cool. We wanted to share that as a best practice. All right, I'm going to go ahead and demo Global Reader to you, but before I get into the demo, I just wanted to highlight the 3 best practices for the problem of too many tasks require global admin. Assign global admin to fewer than 5 people. That's our secure score recommendation. We're standing by that regardless of the size of your organization, and we'll keep doing things like adding new roles and new capabilities to support you in doing that. For the other folks, assign limited admin roles instead. Think about combining those together. And then I won't have time to get into it today, but just-in-time access is a great way to secure your organization when you do need to use highly privileged roles like global admin or exchange admin. Our solution for just-in-time is Azure Privileged Identity Management. If you have E5 for EMS or Microsoft 365, or if you have AAD Premium P2, you will already have this in your tenant. You only need to license the specific admins for this. And we have some links out to best practices, including how Microsoft's own IT department uses PIM. But now let's get into the demo. OK. So here I am. I'm the Microsoft 365 product owner. And the global reader role enables me to come into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and get up-to-date insights specific to my tenant about what's going on. But let's say I want to explore things that we're not taking advantage of that have been included with our purchase. The new setup experience allows me to do just that. I can come in here and see things that are already a part of our subscription and see what the best practices Microsoft suggests are. This catches my eye, increased protection from advanced threats. So I click in, and I see data that's specific to my own tenant, my own organization, about where users are receiving emails that have malicious links or attachments in them. Well, that doesn't sound like a good thing to me. So I'm clicking in to see what it means to get started here. And you can see that I have visibility into the suggested configuration for advanced threat protection. But I can't actually take action to enable ATP. This seems really interesting to me, and I want to figure out who in my organization can actually do this. But I don't know offhand what the right role is. As we move off of global admin, there are so many new roles out there, it's hard for me to keep them straight. But I noticed that over here on this detail page about this capability, I see the suggested role of security admin. And it's great to learn that I don't have to use global admin to turn on this feature. I'm able to see that folks in my organization are assigned to this role already, and I can click in and see exactly who they are. I've actually worked with Miriam in the past on a previous project, so I'm going to send her a note and see what she thinks about evaluating advanced threat protection and turning this on. Global reader support extends beyond the Microsoft 365 Admin Center to other admin experiences. For example, I can go into Teams Admin Center. We've been running a Teams voice pilot, and it's been going well, so I want to expand the scope of the pilot. But I need to see if there are spare phone numbers in my organization. You can see that on this page, I can't take any actions in terms of buying more phone numbers or editing the ones that we have. But I'm able to filter down to the ones that are unassigned. And we only have about 5 spare phone numbers, so I'm going to need to procure more. The specific person on my team who's running this pilot is out of the office for a couple weeks. That sounds pretty nice right now, but I'm still here. And we need to make progress on that pilot. So I can go over and open up privileged identity management. These roles that I'm eligible for have been configured in my organization by our team for just these types of situations. So you can see here, my active role is Global Reader. It's permanently assigned to me, but I'm eligible to activate into roles that can actually perform actions based on the scope of what my team performs. So for me to go ahead and procure those numbers myself, I would click on Activate to elevate into the Teams admin role and then have permission to do that. But let's keep going with the presentation. I wanted to give you a sneak peek at how we actually authorize Global Reader across all of Microsoft 365. As many of you probably know, roles are stored in Azure Active Directory, all of these built-in roles that we've been talking about today. And when you go ahead and assign a role to a user, we create a role assignment in the directory to map that relationship. After authenticating, a user can navigate to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or a similar experience. And we will call AAD, passing the login context securely through the OAuth token, to request a list of the user's permissions across all of the roles that may be assigned to them. Because we've securely passed that token, AAD will give us that list, and we'll start to load the experience based on those specific permissions. We tailor the UI to the things that you're able to see and do so that you have focus and clarity and to prevent confusion. In parallel, we're calling multiple workloads in Microsoft 365 to request data that's specific to the tenant. And we pass through that OAuth token again so that we have the rights to actually get that data back from them. The workloads go ahead and perform their own authorization checks. This is a best practice in the industry that authorization is done at the source of truth for particular data or information or actions. Once they perform those checks, they'll give the data back to the UI, and we'll load that for the user. Global Reader is a very simple idea, but because of the breadth of the underlying services in Microsoft 365, over 20 engineering teams had to do the work to implement the feature, to implement the recognition of the read-only permissions and the independent authorization checks based on those permissions to show users data or information. So hopefully the dramatic lighting will continue. I like it, I'm feeling it. Let's shift over to the next issue that you've told us you have with RBAC. It's really hard to understand who has access to what information and who are your administrators in the first place. So this creates a couple of issues. The first is that overprivilege can fly under the radar. I actually had a conversation with a customer, just as a quick example, where he told me that he was doing something totally unrelated, and he stumbled on the fact that his organization had 20 SharePoint admins. He thought they would only need 2 or 3. He had no idea why they had 20. So he spent the rest of his day looking at data, looking at audit logs, reaching out to folks to understand who are the 2 or 3 people who actually need this role, and who are the rest of the folks who I can go ahead and remove. But that was just by accident that he came across that. That's a problem. We also know that it's time-consuming to do audits. If you're actually following the best practices of understanding who has admin access at least once a quarter, that can lead to weeks of work in spreadsheets, writing scripts, reaching out to folks over email, and that sounds like a pain, and it shouldn't be like that. So we have some new features that we hope will help. We've rolled out a new roles management experience in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. You can find it by clicking on Roles in your left navigation menu. It includes all of the roles that are in Azure Active Directory that can manage parts of Microsoft 365. We heard your feedback that it was a pain point to only have a very small number of these roles showing in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. You had to navigate over to AAD Admin Center. And if most of what you do is with Office 365, that can be the only time you're going out. That can be really annoying to have to go back and forth. So we've exposed that larger set of roles right here in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We also included an export function. So you can click on the Export Admin List button, and you'll get a CSV with a list of all of the roles you're using in your organization and all of the users who are assigned to those roles. And then we're adding actionable insights. Oh, good. I will take that clap, too. Thank you. Yes, I was super excited about that, too. And then we're adding actionable insights into the experience and context. So when you're taking an action, you have information that's relevant to that action that can help you make a better decision. A couple quick best practices on this before we go into the demo. The roles page that I just showed you a screenshot of, which you're about to see in the demo, that is the best place to go for getting that complete view through export or for seeing the list of all users assigned to a particular role. Many of you have already been using active users, or the users page, where you go in and click in and look at all of the roles assigned to a specific user. If the task you're performing is about a specific user and understanding their access across, that is still the best place for you to go. And then, as I mentioned, it's a best practice to audit privileges at least once a quarter. And we have a couple resources that I've linked to here to help you do that. Export Admin List being one of them. Privileged identity management, that Azure capability that's included in the premium SKUs that I was telling you about. They have an access review feature that streamlines the work to reach out to your organization and have folks self-assess whether they actually still need access to a role. And then we have documentation around all of the APIs. So if you want to automate something at the API or PowerShell level, we have a single place that you can go to learn more about how to do that and make sure you know where to go. Now let's take a look at the demo. Okay, so I am no longer going to be a global reader. Here I am as a global admin on that new roles page. I clicked roles in the left navigation to get here. Global admins have access to this page to add or remove users assigned to roles, but all admins in your organization who use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center have a view-only experience with this page. So that can reduce friction collaborating across your organization. They can easily say, oh, I need help for this task. OK, here's someone who can help me. As the global admin, when I come in here for the first time, I'm seeing a default list of suggested roles. These are the roles that are most commonly used by all of our customers. And if you're a smaller organization, it's likely that these are the only roles you will need to assign or will end up assigning. So we want to give you a simple, focused view. In this case, I'm an admin at a larger organization, so this isn't enough options for me. So I click on Show All Roles, and I see the complete list alphabetized. I can scroll down, and I can click Show Suggested Roles if I want to get back to that shorter list. But if this is the better view for me, if I leave the roles list and then come back to it, this is what I'll automatically see. We're not asking you to click Show All every single time. I can click on a role. Let's say I click on Authentication Admin. Again, very excited about that for managing MFA properties for users. And I can come in here and get a more specific view of what that role can do. I can click in and see the users who are assigned to that role. I can add and remove. And I can also see a list of permissions by action type. And then here we have that Export Admin List function that I was talking about. This will give me a list of all of the roles my organization is using and all of the users assigned to those roles. Let's take a look. So here we are. Ooh, it looks like we have a lot of global admins. Yikes. Okay, great. In this case, I'm coming in because Alex recently joined my team, and I need to give him access to start to do things. So since I'm going in to manage roles for a specific user, I'm going to go back to the active users list, and I'm going to click on Alex. I see his user detail view here, and then I click in on Manage Roles. And I click the option to give him Admin Center access. And here you can see that we've included that same short list of suggested roles that are most commonly used by all of our customers. But I have a single click to see the full list organized by category. So let's say that I want to give Alex Groups Admin. You can see I'm promoting all of my favorite new roles here. So I'm going to save. Groups Admin was not a role that was in that short default list. When I go back into Manage Roles, though, I see it right at the top because Alex is assigned to that role. We want to improve your visibility of the roles that people have. We don't want you to have to go hunting through the entire list if you're going in to manage the roles for a specific user. So you'll see all of the roles that the user has assigned to them right at the top. Then you'll see that default suggested list, and then you can still show all if you want. In this case, I'm not really sure what Alex is going to do for our team, but I know I want to get him started. So I'm going to just give him the global admin role. Ooh, but when I do that, an insight pops up for me. So my organization already has 12 global admins. This insight will show when you assign global admin if you have 5 or more, because that is our secure score recommendation again. And I see here the information based on data that we analyze at Microsoft to improve our security best practices, that global admins are attacked twice as often as other accounts. That sounds pretty scary to me. I would need to look into this a little bit more. So I click on global admin, and that takes me to the roles list directly to the global admins list. I want to understand who are these 12 people who are assigned to this role. So I can take a look at this. And in this case, Alan actually switched departments, and he really doesn't need Admin Center access anymore. So I could go ahead and remove him in line. Joni got a promotion recently, and so her team is managing and taking actions in the Admin Center, but she's more supervising that. So what I can do is I can click on Joni, and the user detail page opens up. And I can click on Manage Roles for her and switch her from being a global admin to a global reader directly in line of this roles page. And then if I click back, it takes me back to that global admin list. But let's get back to Alex. So this has scared me into realizing that I probably shouldn't have a brand new person on my team be a global admin just because I haven't figured out exactly what the scope of their work is going to be. So I'm not going to assign global admin. I do know that the first thing I want him to do is a couple different things in Exchange. So I'm going to assign Exchange admin, and then I will give him global reader so that he can start to ramp up on other parts of the service. So let's shift over and talk about that third issue. We're telling you to move to least privilege. We're asking you to have fewer than 5 global admins, but it's not necessarily easy to do that at the moment. We've heard from customers that when you're trying to find the least privileged role for someone, a couple things can happen. There can be a bunch of back and forth that you have with that person because they can't always do the best job of articulating the permissions that they need or the exact task that they're going to do. You might have to spend a bunch of time digging through documentation to understand things. You might actually go ahead and test something in a test tenant just to be sure before assigning them. And If you become exasperated, if this is just taking too much time, you're very busy, you have many other things you need to do for your job, maybe you'll just give them global admin. I've had quite a few customers explain this to me using certain expletives, but marketing told me I couldn't curse on stage. So I can't share the direct quotes, but you can imagine. So we haven't solved this entirely for you. Again, I don't want to overpromise, but we do have a couple new features that we think will reduce the pain of this process. First, we've added search into that new roles experience. And you can search by the name of the role, something that's in the description of the role, or a permission. So we're doing, to get into the weeds a little bit, we're doing a contains search, matching the string that you put into the search with the strings in the name, the description, and the permissions. And I'll show that in a second. We're also giving you the ability to compare roles in the admin center. So you have a clear view of the roles side by side and the permissions they share and the permissions that are different. And then we know that assigning roles for most customers isn't something that you're doing every day or even every week. So when you go back in, it can be painful if you're having to relearn the right roles, which role does what and doesn't do what, what's the difference between these two that sound similar. That can eat up a bunch of time and just be a frustrating experience. So we're giving you the ability to favorite roles so that once you figure out initially that a certain scoped set of roles are the best match for your organization, you have an easy way to identify them when you go back several weeks or months later. A couple best practices for assigning least privileged roles before we get into the demo. Because all of the admins who use the Microsoft 365 Admin Center have a view-only version of the new roles experience, they can do search and compare themselves. So you can try to delegate that initial work of finding what the right role is to the person who needs access, have them go and test it in a test tenant, instead of you're having to manage a lot of that work yourself as a global admin. And as I already mentioned, you can use favorites. Okay, let's get into the last demo. So I am once again a global admin, and I'm going to start back at the roles list. In this case, 2 people recently joined the team, and their primary responsibility, at least initially, will be resetting passwords for our users. So I can go into search, and I can type that task, and I can get a short list of roles that have that task in them, again, using the string mapping. You can see that the string is actually bolded here in the description. So I can look at this information. It's a lot less overwhelming than that full list. And I can see that all 3 of these roles can reset passwords, but I want clarity on what the differences between them are. So I go up here to select all, and I see this compare option where I can select up to 3 roles to compare. I click compare, and I'm brought into this view where the 3 roles are side by side, and their permissions are in these rows here. I can do a couple things with this compare view. I can export it. We know, like I said, that there's back and forth. Maybe you need to go back and ask someone about something to understand what the right role is for them. Maybe a task didn't come up that you're seeing here. And so you can take this view offline, share it with folks, add notes to it, et cetera. You can also search this compare view, and this will search the permissions only. So in this case, the permissions that each of these roles has are fairly limited. I can see them all without having to scroll. That's really convenient. But we know that for other compares that you do between the roles, you might end up with a long list of permissions, and that can be a hassle if there's really 1 or 2 specific things that you care about. So as an example, I can type in MFA. I can see that Privileged Authentication Admin is the only role among these 3 that has those permissions. I can do the same with BitLocker. See, that's help desk admin. In the case of these two new folks on my team, they're really only going to be resetting passwords. So now with this view, it's clear to me that password admin is the least privileged role. So I can click on that role, and directly in line, I can assign it. And I'm able to add that role to more than one person at a time, just to save me some clicks. So I mentioned earlier that we want to give you a focused experience. If you remember that authorization diagram I showed, we're only loading UI elements based on your permissions. So let's look at an example of what that looks like using the password admin role. Here I am as a password admin in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I have a fairly bare experience because I really can only reset passwords. But that also means that it's really easy for me to complete my tasks. I have this big reset password button right here, or I can go into the users list. In this case, I want to reset Diego's password. So I search for Diego, and I can open up this detail view. Or I have this handy quick action key icon right in the list to reset a password. My preferences have been saved for how I like to reset passwords and the settings I like to have. So it's really quick and easy and simple for me to just go ahead and do that. Let's go back to the global admin's roles view. And before we wrap up, let's take a look at favorites. I mentioned a couple roles that I'm particularly excited about today. And I found that those roles were useful for my organization, so I want to go and favorite them so I don't have to recall all the details myself. So I looked up the global reader role. I looked up groups admin, a role dedicated to groups management. Authentication admin, so I don't need global admin to reset MFA when my users call support. And last but not least, password admin. When I come back into the list, if I want, I can sort by favorites, or I can also filter by them. And it's easy to bulk remove or add as well. Glad you like it. Please give us feedback in the product, that feedback widget on the lower right, so we can make sure it's useful for you as you anticipate and keep making it better. So what's next? If I had to ask you all to do just 3 things out of the best practices we showed today, it would be to have fewer than 5 global admin accounts to make your organization more secure, to adopt Global Reader and the other built-in roles, and to audit the admin privileges at least once a quarter using things like export admin list. This is our roadmap. Global Reader and the roles I showed you are all 100% shipped and available today, as is the new roles management experience with search and export admin list, and of course, Azure Privileged Identity Management. We have a couple of the features I showed today that we're in process rolling out and will begin rolling out over the next few weeks. The global admin insight that I showed in context is at about 50%, so many of you will see it, but some of you won't quite yet, but you will soon. Favorites and compare roles as well. And then in development, some of you may have realized that we decided to ship Global Reader without SharePoint support. This goes back to just how complex the work involved was for specific workloads to honor all of those read-only permissions and do those independent authorization checks off of them. So I'm really excited to announce that SharePoint is shipping soon for Global Reader. And my colleague Zohar has a specific session on SharePoint administration coming up next at 12:45, where he'll talk about that in more detail. We're going to keep shipping more additional roles and more granular control. So give us feedback. What are the tasks that you're doing the most frequently using Global Admin? We'll take that feedback, and we use that to prioritize our list of potential roles. You'll also see more features to give you greater visibility across all of the roles, across all of the workloads in Microsoft 365, and help you manage in context of the Admin Center. We'll continue to simplify finding the least privileged role, and we'll continue to give you more actionable insights. We love working off of your feedback. We love understanding your day-to-day, what's annoying, what's helpful, so the features we build are actually valuable to you and make your lives better. So there are a couple of ways to reach out to us. The best way to reach out to us is to use the in-product feedback button in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We analyze that feedback, we read it, we do fancy things on it, we do simple things on it, like email you if we have a follow-up question, if you say it's okay to contact you. So that is the best way to get in touch with us. And there are a couple other ways as well. If you're interested in being involved in our user research, if you like usability studies, UX, we have a link to sign up. Please go do that. And finally, this is just one of many of the sessions where we're focusing on administration in Microsoft 365. If you were particularly excited about that new setup experience I showed with advanced threat protection, my colleague Tim Heaney gave a session that went deep into adoption and getting more value based on what you've already purchased, showing lots of things in that experience. That was yesterday. You can watch the video. And my colleague Carissa went into more of those user management, those user-specific actions and group management actions yesterday as well. Definitely watch that video. And then my colleague Yinsu will be doing a Demo Fest lightning round of all of the demos in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center later today as a theater session. Go check that out. She's awesome. So I'll leave it there. I'll stay here to take questions. And thank you so much for spending your time at Ignite on this session.